what I realized was it actually wasn't other people I couldn't trust. It was that I couldn't trust myself. And that was the hardest thing for me because, people are going to do what they're going to do, right? But if you can't trust yourself to make the right decision, then you're just like living in a state of anxiety, confusion. It's very destabilizing to feel that. And I guess so many things that I thought put me in a good position to really be a great judge of character. And how could I get it so wrong?
Welcome to Your Second Act, the podcast that proves that life doesn't have to end at 40, 50, or even 60, because when it comes to living your best life, age is just a number. Hey guys, welcome back to my very first episode for season 3. Can't believe we're into season 3. Where has the time gone? After a refreshing break, I'm really thrilled to be back, and I've truly missed bringing these stories to your ears every week. And this season, I'm taking things up a notch with some incredible stories from women who are really redefining what midlife looks like. And trust me, the lineup of guests this season is amazing. And today's story is one I've been eager to tell for a long time. A few years ago, when I first started listening to podcasts, a friend suggested the show Who the Hell is Hamish? A jaw-dropping story about an Australian conman who, over 3 decades, manipulated and deceived his way into stealing more than 70 million Australian dollars from unsuspecting victims. I was hooked from the start. And fast forward 4 years, I find myself at a book launch dinner sitting across from Hamish's last victim, Tracy Hall. Today, I am beyond excited to welcome Tracy to the show. She's the author of The Last Victim, and she's here to share her powerful story of betrayal and resilience. This is a tale that captivated much of Australia, and I really can't wait to dive into it with you. Just before we get into Tracy's story, I'd love for you to take a moment to rate and review the podcast. Your feedback not only helps me improve, but it also helps other women discover these incredible stories. Plus, it's a great way to support the show and ensure I can keep bringing you content that inspires and empowers. I really, really appreciate it. Anyway, let's just get into today's episode. Welcome to Tracy's Second Act. Hi, Tracy. Welcome to Your Second Act.
Hey, Michelle, how are you?
I'm really well. I'm so excited to talk to you. I read your wonderful book, The Last Victim. Actually, I read it with my book club group, and we were all blown away by your story. And what I really love about the fact that we're recording it today, because it coincides with Scam Awareness Week. So it actually works out really, really well. So I think what I'm going to do is just hand it over to you, because for people that don't know the story, I think it's best coming from you. So it started with online dating. You met a man called Tavita.
Yes, I did. It was early 2016, and I'd been separated from my husband for just over a year. And I kind of gotten on top of sort of, living in an apartment and single parenting and doing the whole thing, working full time. And I got to that point where I thought, you know what, I just really like to meet someone who has shared interests, shared values. And I didn't want to find another husband. I wasn't going to have any more children. So it was really just finding some companionship, someone to do things that I like doing with. So yeah, went online, fairly slim pickings back in 2016.
I don't think anything's
Um,
changed by the sounds of it.
I've heard that. I've heard that. And yeah, swiped right on a man called Max Tavita, 41, chief investment officer for a family office. He had beautiful blonde hair, clear blue eyes and a big smile. And yeah, he just kind of I guess looked normal. And we spoke on the phone, and then we met in real life, and we proceeded to have a relationship that lasted almost 18 months. Went away on family holidays. He met my mom, all the things you'd expect a normal kind of average early 40s relationship kind of look like, I guess. And it wasn't until mid-July 2017 I woke up one morning to a Crime Stoppers video online of a man being arrested outside of his Bondi Beach apartment for swindling 15 victims out of $7.6 million. And this man's face was blurred out. But of course, I knew without a shadow of a doubt that it was my boyfriend, Max. Except his name wasn't Max. He was, in fact, Hamish McLaren, one of Australia's most notorious conmen. And in the process, he'd stolen my life savings. He stole $317,000. And I
Gosh.
guess it's fair to say he also stole my ability to trust.
Yeah. Wow. So, Tracy, how did you trust this man? I mean, obviously, you started this relationship with him. Like anyone, you fall for somebody. Well, we don't go into relationships thinking they're going to really scam us. Really, you might be thinking it might not work out. He might hurt me, but that's as far as it goes, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Or we might not
how
be compatible or whatever.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. But obviously, he gained your trust. And from the little that I know you, you're a very established, intelligent woman that there is no way that you would have handed over your life savings to someone you didn't trust. How
Mm.
did he gain your trust?
I think you're right. It's like, criminals like Hamish, they don't just pull a fast one. If he had have knocked on my door 2 weeks after we met and said, Trace, put your superannuation into a self managed super, all your tech shares, and I'll invest it for you, I would have said,
No
bugger
way.
off. Like,
Exactly.
I don't even know you. But he has been doing this his whole life and he was a professional and he'd been honing his confidence game for decades. And so what he did was he meticulously worked his way into my life, into the fabric of my being. He found out what my weak points were, I guess, what I wanted out of life. And he essentially just had to reflect that back to me. So he was a very good listener, incredible listener,
Which
and
is
he was very good
attractive,
at.
isn't it, for a
Yeah,
man?
it is.
Yeah.
Sadly,
Yeah.
it is, and he was very good at mirroring. So, for example, if I said, "This is the way I want my life to play out," or "This is what I want my future to look like," which are all the conversations you have when you meet someone that you think you're going to have a long-term relationship with, he just mirrored those back to me. He just created that world for me. And then, in addition to that, in terms of the money, he also created what I kind of can only describe as like a movie. It was like there were sets, there were scenes, and there were characters that he created to have me believe he was exactly who he said he was, a chief investment officer who was very knowledgeable in the finance world, to the point where I thought without a shadow of a doubt he was the best person to help me invest my money and give me financial kind of independence and security and all of those things. So, there were the Bloomberg monitors set up in his apartment. There were the countless conversations I overheard him having where I could hear someone on the other end of the phone, which was supposedly his back office, where he was doing trades and rebalancing portfolios for his, top clients. There were the reports that he would send me every week that were pages and pages long that supposedly went to his family office clients. There were the fake documents that he provided me on my investments with all my trades and what was happening, all on kind of what looked like to be official letterhead. There was, mail in his letterbox addressed to Max Tavita. And of course, Max Tavita doesn't exist. So he created some mail knowing that I would pick the letters out of his letterbox on my way out to his apartment. There was the fake offers. There was the countless conversations we had about finance and, the impact of Trump's antics on the global economy. And it just went on and on and on and on. And, so by the time, a year later almost, when he said, who's your superannuation with and what are you paying in fees? He'd set this trap, and I guess in this case, this is what we would call kind of, financial coercive control and grooming. He basically groomed me and guided me to a point where I I didn't have any doubt that he was the best person to do it.
Did you, when that happened, obviously you trusted him, but did you think to yourself, oh, maybe I'll discuss this with a family member or with a friend of what I'm thinking of doing? Did you do that or you just made the
No,
decision on your
I
own?
I did make the decision on my own because we were in this very intimate and tight relationship, and I
Yeah.
thought he was the person I was bouncing off. But that is one of the things. Ooh, there's the cat. um, that is one of the things that I say to people now is that, we're not comfortable talking about money for so many reasons. There's so much history associated with it. So we're not comfortable talking about how much money we earn. No one talks about their salaries. We don't talk about where we're investing our money. And we certainly don't talk about losing money. So it's kind of like this secret taboo conversation still. Maybe at a top level, people sort of mention things, but it isn't part, even today, it's not part of the conversation that I have with my girlfriends. Like, where are you investing? And what are you doing and who's helping you and who's your financial advisor? We just don't talk about things like that. And so no, I didn't. I did have a friend who asked a lot of questions, and she's one that sort of had her spidey senses up from the beginning, which I write a lot about in the book. And perhaps if I had have had the money conversation or the investment conversation with 5 friends like her, and they all came back with the same thing, then I would have perhaps had some warning bells going off.
What I loved about your book is how you actually everything that you talk about, you will then preface with red flag. And as you're
Yeah.
reading it, you think, yes, red flag. It was
Yeah.
actually really clever the way you did that because I just thought I can completely understand how you were conned by this man because you just
Mm,
would never have thought that he would do something like that. And I myself, if I feel someone is an expert on a certain subject, then I completely believe them. I think, well, they know what they're talking about. So why wouldn't he be able to help me and make me more money or take care of my money? So I completely understand how this can happen time and time again. But you were
mm,
mentioning your friend earlier. I wanted to ask you, I felt for both of you because I thought she got to you just that too late, didn't she? When he was arrested, she was
mm,
going to have the conversation because her warning bells went off a while ago. So
mm,
she started to do a little bit of her own investigation before.
mm.
How did that affect your relationship, Tracy, at all with her?
No, and I think it didn't, but she was really worried that it would. And I think that was part of her hesitation. And she did take me for breakfast one morning and, was really emotional. And Kath's not an emotional person. I'd never seen her cry. We've been friends for like 17 years. And she was, tears streaming down her face. And she said, I'm really worried about you investing with Max. And but she was so worried about how it was going to impact our friendship. The thing is, like, Michelle, she didn't want to be right. She didn't want to be right. She actually wanted to be wrong, but she just had these feelings. And she had spoken to me when she had this sense, but she didn't have any sort of evidence at that point. She just sort of felt it was really off. And then so I sort of, said to her, "But you haven't met him, you don't know him. Let's have a dinner. You'll see he's amazing. He's got my back." And she said, "Okay, let's do that." And then, of course, in the meantime, she was doing all of her background investigations and writing off to universities in the US and trying to gather information. She had another friend sort of come down and take photos of the number plates of his car. They were going to do a number plate check. There was a lot going on in the background that I didn't know about. And I think what she wanted to do was get together a folder of information that she could hand me to and say, "Look, I'm really sorry to have to do this, but this is what I've found." And I guess she knew me well enough to know that I needed that to believe, because she knew how much I was in love with this man and she knew how much I wanted that relationship to be what I wanted it to be, I guess. Um, so that's what she was doing. But, before she kind of got to that point, yes, he got arrested, but she was really worried it was going to impact our relationship. And to be honest, like, I, have so much respect for her because most people, won't ask the questions that need to be asked. They just kind of go, "Oh, that's nice. He sounds great." And secondly, go off and do their own investigations. But thirdly, like actually have the guts to, say to your face, look, I'm really worried. Like this is really concerning me. I mean, that's how much she loves me. That's how I saw it. Like she, and I could tell she was so upset by it. And, so no, I mean, in essence, it's just like I just know she's got my back always. She can have my back in that moment. She'll have my back in every moment. And yeah, she would. I mean, when it all went down, she was the first one to land on my doorstep with a bottle of wine, and she stayed with me for a few days and just slept in my bed and just held me really. And, so there's a lot to be said for all of that. But yeah, no, it didn't. I mean, we're still really good mates today.
That's
But yeah, it
great.
must have been so hard for her.
Oh, that really came across in the book. I thought, "Oh, what would I do in that situation?" It's a really tough one. Was she the friend who alerted you to his arrest as well?
Yes, she
It
was.
was.
Yeah.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah. She's
Can
the
you
one that sent
take
me the
me
link.
Yeah. Can you take me through that day? What was it like to find this out?
Yeah, well, it sort of started about 24 hours earlier. I just got back from Byron Bay. I've been up in Byron Bay with Hamish. I'd done a presentation at a marketing conference and he came up to support me. He sat with me while I practiced my presentation. He was very, very supportive. And I got back and went straight into school holiday mode. And I was busy one morning, like getting kissed at gymnastics camps and the whole thing. And I missed a call from him. I thought, oh, that's cool. When I drop the kids off, I'll get onto it. And I called him back, no answer. I spent the rest of the day trying to get back in touch with him. By that night, I was pretty concerned. By the next morning, and I still hadn't heard, I was frantic. So I called Bondi Police at about 5 a.m. and I asked them to do a wellness check on him because I just knew something was wrong. And while Bondi Police were off doing that, I received a call from Kath and she said, "How are you?" And I said, I haven't slept a wink. I'm really worried about Max. Haven't heard from him in 24 hours. Something's wrong." She said, "I'm going to send you a link and you're going to open it and then you're going to call me back." And I'm like, "Oh my God, he's dead. There's been an accident. There's been a shark attack. Something's happened." And she said, "He's not dead. Just open the link and call me back." And she sent me the link and it was the Crime Stoppers video. And I think everything just went numb. I mean, partly too, I was in a bit of shock and disbelief because I was watching this man who had just, spent a weekend supporting me up on the Gold Coast for a career opportunity, being led away in a police car to a courthouse with his face blurred out. And the headlines were kind of like, Bondi businessman, 47 superannuation fraud. And I was so confused because I was like, but they've got it wrong because Max is only 42. That was what was going through my head. Like that's how weird my brain went at the time. And it wasn't until I then spoke to the detectives and also received a text message from his brother-in-law who was getting back in touch with me saying, "Call me when you can." Chris, and in brackets, he wrote Hamish's brother-in-law. And I called him and I said, "Chris, who the fuck is Hamish? Like, I don't know who Hamish is. I know Max." And yeah, and then that conversation plus the conversation with the detectives, I had to call Bondi Police back and tell them not to do a wellness check because he was okay. He was just arrested. Um, and, they couldn't give me any information. So I ended up heading up to the police station. I spent the rest of the day in the police station.
So you're sitting there and you're thinking, uh, it's probably you feeling like you're dreaming this situation, like this cannot be real because the whole time that you were with him, you never once suspected anything. Is that correct? Not
No, I
once.
mean, he was certainly quirky. Like, there were definitely quirks, but it's kind of like, I don't know, you get to this age and you go, well, everyone's got something, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Everyone's a little bit weird. I mean, I'm a bit weird in some ways as well. So
Yeah.
yeah, definitely. But in terms of like him buying about his name or any of that stuff, then no, not once did I think that would be him.
So then you started working closely with the police.
Yeah.
And what happened then?
Well, I pretty much spent the next 3 weeks untangling the previous 18 months of my life. And that included working with the detectives on a statement, and I had to remember everything, like when the phone calls were, what we spoke about, where we went on dates, where we parked the car, what we ate on dates, all the text messages. I had to provide all of my bank statements, transactions that had occurred, WhatsApp messages. Like there was so much I had to give them to get the statement. Um, and then there was a whole bunch of other very practical things I had to take care of. So I had to work with the ATO because I may or may not have had a fraudulent tax return that Hamish had helped me with, and I was completely unaware. So I had to work with them because I didn't want to be in any type of trouble, kind of thing. I had a non-compliance superannuation fund that I had to unwind and figure out what I was going to do with and alert all the authorities. I had my daughter was 6, she had to go to school in her activities, so decided there'd be no tears at the dinner table and just pressed on. And, I had to go back to work because it was the only financial lifeline I had left. I had nothing. Like I had literally nothing in any bank account except for my monthly income. And I was working a really big job at eBay at the time and they were super supportive, because obviously I had to let them know what had happened. Um, but I had to get back to work, and I guess I was so scared about losing my job. And if I had have lost my job, that would have been an absolute like that. Talk about disasters. That would have been the biggest disaster. So I just doubled down, and I just worked harder, and it was a great distraction at the time, but yeah, there was a lot going on that kept me distracted and busy, but, yeah, was a lot to take care of. Yeah.
So going back to the day you found out he was arrested, at what point that day did you think, my money?
Uh, probably probably when I was up at the police station talking to the detectives, because they asked me if I had given him any money, and I said, "Yes, he's invested my superannuation, my self-managed super. There's been some other transfers that have gone into that, but everything's been set up legitimately." And I guess that was what was really difficult, was that I felt like in relation to my self-managed super fund, I felt like I'd done everything right, and it was set up correctly. He had guided and groomed me through that whole process. So, and to set up a self-managed super fund, you have to have it set up correctly for the super fund to release your money, and there's checks and balances in place. Um, but I felt like I'd done that correctly. But the more I spoke to the police, and the more I sort of found out, and of course, they couldn't really tell me about other victims or anything like that. I think I asked them at one point in those weeks following, like, "Do you think there's any chance I will get my money back?" And it was it was vague, but it was probably clearer than at the time, I thought there was possibility, but when I look
Yeah.
back, I think they were just softly trying to tell me no, because they had seen all the bank accounts,
And they
that
had
they
been
just pretty much
following
said no.
him. They'd been following him for a long time, hadn't they? They've been
I
watching
think it
him.
was about 6 months from what I
6
understand.
months, right.
Yeah, because I think there were some complaints, and then they were looking into, yeah, they were looking into him because it's actually very difficult to prosecute fraud, because in in terms of what actually happens, it can be considered a civil case. So just a misunderstanding or a disagreement between a couple of people about a business opportunity that went wrong, essentially. Um, what they have to do is prove that it's, using financial proceeds by deception, for their own personal gain. There's so much that needs to be like proven with fraud. And that's why it's very, very difficult. That's why so much of it happens. And and then nothing really happens, because it's considered often a civil case, and then
So,
you're required to
yeah,
kind of take that to court yourself.
my gosh. So you
Mm.
actually this obviously happened a few years ago. You have not, to this day, been able to recoup the money. You have no
No,
idea where it is.
no, none of the victims have got any money back.
Yeah. Um, so he went to jail. He's still in jail.
Mhm.
When is he meant to be coming out of jail?
He's up for parole in July 2026, so about 2 years.
How do you feel about that?
Um, I mean, I guess if I'm being really pragmatic, they can't keep people incarcerated forever, right? Like there's a point. Um, I don't know if there's been any rehabilitation. I'd like to hope so. I'm not sure. I guess the way I think about it is the only person that knows the answer to that question is Amish. And, I just have to focus on myself and rebuilding my own life and, educating as many people as possible to the pitfalls of these types of things because I just don't want it to happen to anyone else. So that's what I'm focused on. I guess the challenge is, from what we know about Hamish, is he's never really done anything else. So for him to go and get a proper job, I don't know if that's possible, but again, it's gonna be up to him, like, I can't there's nothing
Yeah.
I can do about that.
And he initially tried to contact you when he went to prison.
Mm.
Did you speak to him?
Yeah, I spoke to him a number of times, and I received letters from him, so that kind of lasted probably about 6 months, 5 or 6 months after he was arrested, and the phone calls were, obviously, he has to call me, and you get 6 minutes when you're receiving a phone call from jail. And yeah, I mean, in the beginning, I just had so many questions. There were so many questions I needed answered. And um, yeah, I sort of figured out pretty quickly that I wasn't going to get any answers from him, at least no answers that I could trust. Because, if you think about it, the previous 18 months had been all lies, like nothing, I could trust nothing that he said. So why all of a sudden would he want to tell me the truth? And then the letters came, and they were just a combination of how difficult life was for him in jail and memories that we had had, like just these like rambling memories about things that we had done to try and elicit emotion from me. He really wanted me to go and see him. Um, and I guess I saw these communications as sort of like him kind of like dangling a $317,000 carrot in front of my face just to go, and I just didn't I just wasn't in a strong enough place to do it. I also thought to myself, what's he gonna suddenly tell me? Like, here's where you go get your money. Like, there was never gonna be any good that would come of it. Um, and I was in such a bad place emotionally that it just probably would have sent me sideways again. So I decided never to go and visit him.
Do you think he feels remorseful at all? Do you think has he ever shown any signs of remorse for what he's done?
Um, Through the court case, he wrote a letter that said he was sorry, but it was like a page long. He chose not to speak, which is his right to do in the system that we have
Oh,
in
that's
Australia.
interesting.
Um, but I mean, what's he going to say in that moment? I guess he did write a letter as part of that process, and the judge read out some of it. I don't really remember too much of what it said, other than yeah, it sounded. He said he was sorry for what he did. But, I mean, what else is he gonna say in that moment, really?
Exactly. So how I mean,
Dunno.
he has scammed over was it the last 20 years?
Yeah, 20 to 30 years, apparently.
How many people have on record has he scammed?
Well, I don't know about how many people, but, as part of the Australian case, there were 15 victims, and it was $7.6 million. Globally, in terms of what so Greg Barrett, the investigative journalist from The Australian who wrote Who the Hell is Hamish and produced that. He, through his investigations, he's kind of estimating between 80 to $100 million globally.
So I wonder where all this money has gone. Like, what did he
Yeah.
do with it all?
Well, I think, you either pay people back if it's sort of like some sort of a Ponzi scheme, you use it to pay people back,
Yeah.
or to show results of the investment so that you can get more money. You stash it away somewhere for a rainy day. You spend it, or you gamble it. I mean, I don't know if there are many other options.
Exactly. Wow.
Mm.
So you how one thing that came up in our book club, they all wanted to know, how have you been able to rebuild trust in a relationship? Because you are in a relationship now, and you touch a little bit on your current partner in the book, and they all wanted to know about that. Like, how have you been able to do that when you obviously hit rock bottom to the point where I think anyone would think, I could never be in another relationship again?
Mm. I think, I mean, if I talk about trust more broadly, because it's not just in a relationship, it was literally my whole world I had to trust again. And, because you rely on so many people for so many things. And yeah, I felt like I was sort of living in this parallel universe for a while afterwards where I was sort of side eyeing everyone, if I'm honest. And I think what I realized throughout that time, and it was like I was in a pretty deep hole for about a year afterwards, maybe longer. And what I realized was it actually wasn't other people I couldn't trust, it was that I couldn't trust myself. And that was the hardest thing for me because, people are going to do what they're going to do, right? But if you can't trust yourself to make the right decision, then you're just like living in a state of anxiety, confusion. Um, it's very destabilizing to feel that. And I guess I had felt really my whole life like I had a really good intuition and I felt like I could really read people. I've traveled the world. I've had great jobs. I'm very, I'm lucky to have a great education. Like so many things that I thought put me in a good position to really be a great judge of character. And how could I get it so wrong? And so really rebuilding that trust in myself was the first thing I had to do. And then slowly that then kind of ebbed out to the rest of my world in terms of people taking care of my child and trusting that
Mm,
people, are doing what they say they're going to do, or in business, or, really trust impacts everything we do. Our whole society works on these contracts of trust that we actually don't even think about on a daily basis. Like if you go to the doctor, have you ever asked the doctor for their medical degree?
no, never.
You
That's
don't. You
right.
trust that they've got the right qualifications. You trust that they will prescribe you the right medication
Yeah.
for your symptoms. You get on an airplane, no one swings left with their portable breathalyzer and asks the pilots to do a quick breath test. We just trust that the rules and regulations that we have in our world protect us, right? And of course, life wouldn't work if we were all really hectic cynics. So it needs to exist. It would be horrible. So, all of these things that exist around us, but when you don't trust yourself and you've been so incredibly betrayed on all levels, building that back up took a very long time. And then in terms of relationship, I think once I have that within myself, or at least built that up again a bit in myself, then I was in a position where I didn't feel so scared. And, my partner is someone that I worked with 20, 22 years ago. So I've known him for a very long time, even though we weren't close that whole time. But I do know his background. I do know his family. I do, there was so much I knew about him just due to our shared history. And I often say if it wasn't him, then I'd be a lonely cat woman. I don't know, it's
Yeah,
really hard. It's something that I think about and that I have to check myself on all the time.
yeah,
Like, even now, 7 years down the track, I really have to work hard at being open and trusting, I
yeah,
guess.
yeah,
It's just something that is continuing.
yeah. So with your book, what was the inspiration behind writing it?
Well, I'd been thinking for a while about writing a book and just thought, "Oh, it'd be interesting to pen this all down. And of course, the podcast was a story about Hamish and all of the different victims and sort of, the worlds that he had basically blown up. And obviously, I had a big story around that as well. And I met a ghostwriter at a charity event one day, and I just reached out to her. I slid into her DMs and said, I've been thinking about writing a book. I'd love to get your thoughts on it. I think I've got an interesting story." And she was a mad fan of the podcast, and we just started talking, and she said, "Let me help you." And we wrote a bit of a pitch and a chapter summary that went over to some publishers, and we were lucky enough to get a book deal. So it all
But
just kind of,
how could you not get a book deal? I mean, I remember the very first podcast I ever listened to was Who the Hell is Hamish? And that is
ah,
so weird that you and I, years later,
wow,
meet at this other book launch and I'm here
yeah,
listening to your story. So yeah, I
yeah,
mean that is one podcast that people definitely remember. So I'm so glad that you did take the time to write your story because I think it will open the eyes to a lot of people because in Australia, I think I was just looking at a stat. Hundreds of thousands of scams happen every single year. And all of us, it happens to all of us. I mean, I get so many on my phone, online, people ringing, but it's just those poor people that are so trusting that go down that path. So you're actually advocating for this
yeah.
now since going through that. Tell me a little bit about your work.
Yeah, so I've learnt so much about this world since I've come out and started speaking about it. So many people come to me and tell me their stories. And surprisingly, most people who get scammed in Australia and potentially globally will never ever meet their perpetrator. So what happened to me was very extreme. It was very intimate and in real life. But most people who get scammed will get scammed digitally, through all of these scams that we're getting exposed to. AI is playing a huge role at the moment. And what we're seeing is there are scammer businesses that are being set up in Southeast Asia where there are hundreds of thousands of employees that are often victims of human trafficking themselves that are being taken to these scammer compounds. And they're incentivized and KPI'd and tortured if they don't meet their quotas. And these are the people, and they're essentially, they've got technology, they've got playbooks, they've got data, they've got AI that is coming out of these compounds is said to be more than 2 years ahead of any government agency in the world. So these fake celebrity impersonation scams where the AI is voice cloning children that are calling their parents. So it's no longer the, "Hey, your package hasn't arrived at the post office." You'll get a call from what sounds like your child, and it's not your child, it's just been voice cloned to transfer some money to help them out. And of course, what happens is they're playing on, and it doesn't matter if it's intimate fraud or whether it's a scammer kind of compound. What they do is they try and elicit an emotion from the victim. And the emotions are generally something like fear. Your something's gonna happen to your kid if you don't transfer some money to them or they don't have their phone. Excitement, got this great investment deal for you. You're gonna have a secure future. Or love. Or it could be a combination of those things. And once those emotions are heightened within a human, you actually have less access to your logical thinking. So you're not thinking. So all the things that look like red flags in hindsight, at that time they're not because you're in this emotional state. And then you layer over the top of that some situational vulnerability. Now, this is not just lonely people looking for love on the internet. This could be you've had a baby and you haven't slept for 3 weeks or 3 months. It could be that you've just got so much going on, you're a bit distracted. Could be you're an international CEO that's moving across time zones and you're jet lagged. Could be any number of things that get you when you're just not quite on your ball, and then you put the emotion over the top and your access to your logical thinking is gone, and that's the perfect petri dish for scammers to thrive. And they have playbooks that teach people how to do this. And so we are up against these huge kind of businesses and the governments, the telcos, the banks, and us as citizens. We're really struggling to keep up, to be honest. And that's why I spend all my time now educating people, working with the banks, working with, government, of course, advocating on behalf of victim support. There's a lot to do in this space. It's getting more and more sophisticated. These people that are getting scammed are not lonely old women that don't know how to use the internet. They are, there's a scam for everyone. So that's
That's
kind of how it
petrifying.
works. And yeah, but educating people on it so that we are more aware, it's just going to help us all be a little bit more financially, I don't know, secure, vigilant,
Yeah.
resilient, all of those things.
Awareness, and it's so true. It's I think you made a point earlier on in our discussion how, as a society, we don't discuss money, and we find that really uncomfortable. And I sometimes, when you were saying that, I thought, I wonder why. Why is that? So when these scams do occur, it's the worst thing in the world because we actually haven't told people about our situation, our financial situation. We just keep it to ourselves, and then we're shamed when something does happen. So I think what you're doing is an amazing thing, Tracy, just bringing awareness to the fact
Mm,
that it doesn't discriminate. It can happen to absolutely any one of us. I think I'm fine. I mean, I constantly get this crap all the time. But the other
mm,
day, our CFO calls us to say, "Hey, I just got an email from you saying to transfer some money into another account." And I
mm.
just thought, "Oh my God." If I was busy, I probably thought, "Oh yeah, I probably do that because there's so much happening."
Yeah.
And I might have said yes, but I knew, and he also was alerted to the fact that it just didn't sound like me. So
Mm.
it's really,
It's,
really
yeah.
frightening.
It is. There was one, I think it was in Hong Kong or Singapore recently, where exactly that same scenario happened, but on a Zoom call. But the people on the Zoom call were actually scammers that had been deep faked AI to look like colleagues, right? And this is possible. So even it, he was about to transfer something crazy like $20 million or something, and it was this Zoom call with colleagues asking about this transfer of money, the instructions all looked completely legitimate. And it was a scam. And this is the type of technology that we're up against. And it is frightening. But there are things that you can do as well to protect and educate yourself. And at the moment, we are relying on the banks and the government and the telcos to put some technology and systems in place to help protect us, which is it's happening, and they're spending so much money and so many man hours to try and address these issues. But there is a role for consumers to continue to play, to educate themselves. And, you might even think that you're quite well educated in this space, but you've probably got someone older in your life, whether it be a grandparent or a parent that isn't. And I think it is up to us as well to sit with them and help them. Like I said to my mum, do you have two-factor authentication set up on all your accounts? She goes, what is that? And I need to sit with her and help her do that and explain to her, or do the biometrics, put your thumbprint as and then no one, even if they've got your password, they can't do it. And she doesn't know what a biometric security login is. But if I sat with her and taught her, she would be more educated. So I really think there's a place for us to support the seniors in our community as well. I've written a workshop for them. I want to go and deliver it a good 3 hours and just take them through step by step. Here's how you look up a financial advisor to see if they're actually qualified to advise you on your finances. Here's how you can look up a website that someone sends you to change your bank details. There's all these things you can do. I guess it's difficult because all of this information sits in many different places and the language isn't always familiar to people. But when you break it down and you explain it and you just give them a few, they're like, oh, I'll do that next time. So, and I think the other thing too that I'm really careful about is not like we don't want to live in an alarmist society. Like I've heard older people, my mum is one that I don't click on anything. I don't answer any calls. I don't click on anything. I don't look at anything anymore. And I'm like, well, I don't know if that's the world we want to live in either. But I can understand why they're really frightened. So I think just having this will give people a little bit more confidence, a little bit more resilience, and just the education that's needed. And these things are changing on the weekly, so we've got to keep up.
And also, I think, like our kids' generation as well, even though they're really
Mm,
savvy,
mm.
but they can also be quite scammed by a lot of people because they don't have the lived experience. So, yes, I'm all about
Yeah.
that, just making sure, like, I've got a password keeper and, that takes
Mm,
you through another form of identification. And yeah, it is a pain in the ass because it takes you forever to log in. But you know what? If you're safeguarding yourself, and my husband and I have actually put our kids onto that as well. So just
mm.
trying to get them to understand and live like that because, like you said, it
Yeah.
changes on the daily and it
Yeah.
is quite
Kids
frightening.
are kids are getting targeted a lot with not so much the hey mums obviously, but a lot of sextortion scams are going on with younger kids now. So and again, AI is playing a role in that where they will have a pornographic photo and then put the person's head on and say, unless you give me $500, I'm sending this around to the whole thing, or I'm putting this on the internet, or all your contacts will get it. And that's a huge one for younger people at the moment. So learning how to deal with that as well.
Absolutely. So,
Mm.
Tracy, what's the future looking like for you now? After you've gone through all of this, you've
Oh, the
got your
future
great
looks
book.
good. Yeah, the book is so um I'm so proud of the book because it not only tells the story of Hamish, but as you know, it tells the story of my life before I ever met Hamish. And a lot of things without giving away any spoilers, because I'd love everyone to read my book.
And they
But
should. Yeah.
a lot happened before I even met Hamish, which is kind of interesting backstory. And then post Hamish and post the podcast, what happened. And I think I wanted it to act as a beacon of light in a sense that anyone going through a hard time, it doesn't have to be losing your life savings to a conman. We're all faced with adversity throughout our lives. Like everyone's had something. And there is a light at the end of the tunnel. There are things you can do. Life goes on. It absolutely goes on, and we can thrive again and trust again. And so I didn't want it to be a shocking, sad Sally story. I wanted it to be quite uplifting and inspiring. So yeah, and then I've sort of, I guess, found purpose in this predicament that I found myself in. And now full time, I speak, at conferences and to corporates, and I want to get into schools. And, there's so much knowledge to be shared. And, I would love to be the person to do that. So that I'm just focusing 100% of my time
Hmm.
on it at the moment.
Well, thank you for doing that because we need more people like you to raise that awareness. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing where, your path takes you and your book. For all the listeners, please go and buy it. There's also an audio version, which is great, which I also listen to the audio version.
Did you hear my
Yeah, and
voice?
it's lovely because it's you. You're telling the story,
It is.
and yeah, I,
Yeah.
I I really enjoyed it. I love the book. I read it within a few days, and that's a lot for me because it takes me forever to get through books. But yours, it was just such a compelling story, and it's a real story. And I wish you all the very best with it because it's amazing what you went through and you've come out the other end. And now you're here wanting to help people. So I
No,
commend
thank
you
you so much.
on that. Now, to
I
end
appreciate it.
my podcast, I always like to ask my guests the same questions. I don't know about you, but I love a quote. Sometimes when I'm feeling a little bit flat or down, sometimes it's like a bit of a positive affirmation. Now, is there a quote that has stuck with you throughout your life that you'd like to share with us?
This is such a great question because I love quotes as well. But there was one that my mum told me it, but apparently it came from my grandfather. And she always said, "Oh, Grandpa always used to say," and the quote is, "Your first thought is the father of all thoughts." So the first thing that pops into your head is generally the right answer because it's driven by intuition or just a knowing, right? It comes from within. It's not kind of rationalized or psychoanalyzed or anything,
It's your
and
gut, isn't it?
yeah,
Yes.
a little
Yeah.
bit. Yeah, just kind of your inner knowing. And, but she used to say to it, when I was going for exams and stuff at school, just remember your first thought is the father of all
Oh,
thoughts. And I've always remembered it because I've
that's a
just
nice
thought,
quote.
yeah, it's just a really interesting one, just not to second guess yourself, I guess.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah,
So true. And we do that a lot, don't we? But
we do.
yeah, intuition is an amazing thing, isn't it? And at times we want to push that intuition away, the first thought
Mm,
that comes into our head, because sometimes we don't want to believe it, but there's a lot to be said about it. So I love your
yeah.
quote. Thank you for
What's your
sharing.
quote?
What is for you will not go by you. A girl I lived
Um,
with back in my 20s said that to me once. I don't know, I was heartbroken or something. And I thought, I'm never going to find anyone. And she said that to me, and I don't know what it is. It has stuck with me. And I tell my kids this all the time, and now they use it. I've always loved it. And I think that is so true. It's
Oh,
destiny, it will come to you. Yeah, I'm a big believer.
mhm. I love
So,
that. Gosh, there's
yeah,
so many good quotes out there.
there,
I
there are.
I think I've written a few of them in the book as well. But yeah, there's some great ones. Love it.
Oh. Well, thank you, Tracy, once again for sharing your very powerful story. I'm so honoured that you chose your second act to do that on, and I will be leaving in the show notes links to your wonderful book. As I said, you can also listen to it. So yeah, all the best, and with your raising awareness, keep doing the
Yeah.
great work. It's wonderful.
There's some resources on my website which people can download for free, just like tips and tricks to prevent from scams with links to great websites to help you. So yeah, you're welcome to
Fantastic.
download that as well.
Great. Well, I'll put that all in the show notes. Thank you, Tracy, and all the
Thanks for
best.
having me. Nice to talk to you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Your Second Act. If you enjoyed this episode, I'd love it if you could rate and leave a review on your favourite podcast platform. Your feedback means the world to me.